Hi everybody, this is Dr. Dirty Dirk and I'm down here in the dark matter lab. As you can see, we've moved along quite a bit on the base. Right now it's all sanded, ready to be disassembled and finished and then glued together. So now we're going to start working on the top. The top is quarter sawn. What we're going to do here, we got the boards kind of roughed out to their rough length, and we're going to tongue groove top together, and then we're going to tongue groove the ends, and we're going to do a breadboard end to make it look finished. And since this lumber is pretty poor quality, I've had quite a bit of trouble coming up with something to make the breadboard ends for. So I took the last board that I had, which is quite warped and has a tremendous amount of skips and defects in it, and I cut it into 4 pieces, and I'm going to plane each of these down to 7/16 thick, and I'm going to glue them together to create my 7/8 inch thick breadboard ends. This is going to leave a seam in all the edges of the boards, so I've taken quite a lot of time to try to match up the grain on the ends. It's going to look pretty intentional with the end grain being book matched, and the edges, all the wood is matched. Obviously you'll still see the seam. That's my only option, and these are the last 4 pieces of this wood that I have. If I can't make these work, I got a real problem making the top for this desk with this material. Alright, so the tongue groove part went surprisingly well. There's an awful lot of steps involved when you're trying to do this with a router table, and actually get the 2 parts to mate up and be quite tight is somewhat of a miracle. You only have 1 shot to do it, and luckily it worked out pretty good. Now on this tabletop, I'm going to be adding a breadboard end. It'll help tie together the planks, but it's also going to allow the planks to move over the seasons to expand and contract. Now there's quite a lot of things you have to take in consideration, otherwise when the boards start to expand it'll just break or crack or do something. When lumber wants to expand, there's really nothing that's going to stop it. So you have to kind of plan out a little bit of movement in the joint, and it's a little tricky with glue because glue doesn't let too many things move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this to length with the boards just clamped together dry, and I'm going to cut each end using a track saw, and I'm going to take these apart and I'm going to individually run a tongue that'll fit into my breadboard end. And after I run the tongue, I'm going to actually use a domino biscuit to serve as a tenon. So the tenons will be in each individual board, and when it's glued to the breadboard end, only the tenon area is going to be glued to the breadboard. So that'll mean that each board is tied together in one spot, leaving the rest of the board able to shift as it grows. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to glue these two edges, then I'm going to glue one tenon at the middle of each board, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a space in between the boards because right now it's winter time. The relative humidity's been around 30 to 40%. So I'm going to purposely put a gap in these so come summertime, as the boards expand, they'll have some place to go without breaking out the ends of my breadboard edge. So most of you have probably gone out and bought a really expensive Festool track saw. I have a track saw system that I built probably 20 to 30 years ago. It's called plywood track saw, and it's simply a piece of plywood with a fence on it that I can clamp over the line, and my skill saw, which is a commercial style DeWalt, will ride against this fence and it'll cut directly up against the edge of my saw guide. So I've spent quite a bit of time dry fitting these parts together. I've cut up playing cards, which are about 25 thousandths for two pieces of them. With four of them in there, it gives me about 0.1 inches of extra width. So, which is just a little bit underneath an eighth of an inch. So my intention is that this panel isn't going to expand any more than that. If it does, it's going to take quite a bit to break the glue joints, but usually when wood wants to move, there's not much that's going to stop it, especially when it comes to growing in width. So again, this board is not going to change in length because lumber doesn't expand along the length. It only expands across the width and the thickness, and of course quite a bit more along the width than the thickness, depending on whether it's radial or tangential grain direction. This being quarter sawn is not going to expand and contract real badly. So let's go ahead and glue this up. Number of large voids in these boards. There's a number of very small voids. I've gone ahead and sized all the wood and dug out all the loose wood, and I've sized it with CA glue. And I've got some casting epoxy. I'm going to tape off the bottom of these, and we're going to fill these with clear epoxy. And I'm not going to stain the epoxy because I actually think it'd be interesting to see inside the clear surface to the contour, the shape of the wood underneath. Never really done that. Usually cut holes like this out and don't use them. So this is new for me.